Good morning. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your consciousness transformation and ascension guide, originator of Trinity Energy Progression, bringing you this week's Living the Shift. This topic, I went back, it was funny, I went back and looked at my topics from the past. I'm like, I know I've talked about this, but everything sort of blends together after a while. This and tied into some other stuff that I think I even have next week's topic. But what is really prevalent, and I see this going on right now, we talk about in the spiritual world about how beliefs really are big factors in how we act, right? Pretty much how when we say we can or we won't do something, it's because of things that we believe. And a lot of times it goes back to the beliefs around good and bad, around what's right and wrong. And it's a lot of times that, so what's a challenging thing for us to get out of in our minds is right and wrong, good and bad, and all that kind of stuff, because we're taught from the beginning that there's a good and bad. Well, in existing in duality, good morning, Laurel. In existing in duality, in bipolarity, as we do, we have these, like good and bad is a polarity, and or good and evil, or whatever you want to call it, right and wrong. And so we're taught, we choose to believe from an early age what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad. And from there, we then make our judgments on what we should do, what we shouldn't do, what we can do, what we can't do. So one of the biggest keys that I talk about a lot, especially in the context of Trinity Energy Progression, when we teach it, it's about getting beyond the belief of there is a good and a bad, a right and wrong. Because here's the thing, anything that's subjective is all based on filter, opinion, which means ego, and ego's job has been to support the exploration of individuality and separation, which there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just important to be it's just important to be aware of that, because in that separation and individuality is the filter of the individual journey. And from there, the decisions that we make based on the experiences that we've had. So here's the funny thing. So we have, say 10 people. Hey, Kathy, good morning. So we say, like, from 10 people, you ask them what's good and what's bad. And or you say, like, you give them a situation, you ask them to tell you if they believe it's a good or a bad situation. You're most likely going to get different shades of gray, or maybe completely different answers from the 10 different people. And that all depends on their background, what they believe, what they hold with themselves, all that kind of stuff. I mean, you can even go to places, you can even go to things like murder, and it's like, oh, but if the person was being attacked, they're justified, or, oh, no, murder is bad no matter what. Like, you can have all of these discussions, and that is all, it's all subjective. It's all based on an individual's beliefs and what they hold. So that's a very simple example of when we say, so, and it does relate to this whole can, can't, mustn't, haven't, or not haven't, have to, right? Won't. Well, actually, won't is more like a definitive, versus can't is a perspective. So let's go to other things, right? We always talk about, well, I can't do that. And really, the thing is for us, because we can do anything, right? We can talk about quantum physics till we talk to a turn blue in the face. People like scientific proof. They want to talk about, how it could be, it has to be definitive and proven. You can talk about that till you turn blue in the face too, because we do have a lot of it now in the further development, as a continuous development in the field of quantum physics, where we have so much evidence that shows that what we look at is what's created, right? So we create our realities. So therefore, if we hold a belief within us that something has to be a certain way, well, guess what happens? We create it a certain way. If we say we can't do something, so it's so funny, because if we keep on saying I can't do something, guess what? You keep on creating the fact that you can't do it. So what that has to do with beliefs, and underneath those beliefs are things like this. I'm not powerful enough to create everything in my reality. I'm a victim to my reality. Other people do things to me. I'm a victim to life. There are a lot of beliefs underneath this, or like I can't help it. And the funny part is, yes, we come in with those beliefs, but also we're taught them, and we choose to accept them or not, right? So when you grow up with a child, like as a child, and have parents say that are very over anxious, everything is dangerous, everything will make you sick, everything could cause you harm, then you grow up believing, right, that the foundation of your reality is everything can cause you harm, everything can make you sick. And many times, sometimes you go the absolute opposite direction because you're just like, oh my God, that was just way too suffocating. And yeah, and usually that's from experience. Oh yeah, like, no, look, I did this and I'm fine. No, I did this and I'm fine. So there's a lot of different areas, and this is such a big topic to encompass for a half hour. But one of the biggest things I want to get to has to do with when we talk about being sick, when we have situations in our lives that we say, I can't change this. We have gotten into a very big, deep habit of saying, I can't change this, right? Especially when it comes to physical things within our bodies. Oh, I have diabetes. I can't change that. Oh, I have degenerative arthritis. I have a genetic ailment of some sort that's, been passed down. I can't change that. When we believe that, and we keep on saying that to ourselves, so then we keep on creating that, right? And yet I see it time and time again that when we open the possibility, we open the door. I have so many people who've come to me over the years, and it's great because they come to me after they've tried everything else, and then they walk in the door and they say, I was told I can't change this. The doctors told me that there's nothing I can do, and I don't believe them. I know I can do something and change this within myself. That's when we are ready to change, right? We go through so much in our lives saying, oh, I can't do that. It's forbidden. Or if the doctor told me that I have this, I have it, and I can't change it. And I will tell you from personal experience, myself changing things that are supposed to not be changeable, but also helping others change things within themselves that they were told weren't changeable, or that they were started out believing or being told that wasn't changeable. That it's all relative, right? We have the ability to change everything. And the first step in the creation of our realities is to take responsibility for the creation of our reality and say, yeah, I made all that. The good, what I consider the good and the bad, right? Because that's all ego, right? What's good or bad? Well, if that was really painful, I consider it bad. Well, but from the bigger picture, often when we look at it from a higher perspective, our higher consciousness says, well, did we learn the lesson that we chose to learn through having this experience? Did this experience create the catalyst that I wanted to have as a lesson? That's not bad. It is what it is. And it was completed. So it's interesting because, a lot of people come in and they say, well, I can't forgive this, or I can't let go of this. And it's like, well, the real word is I won't. Okay. And when you say I won't, that's taking responsibility, because then that says I choose not to let go of this, right? When somebody says I can't, it implies that they have no control over it, right? That they're a victim to it. But when you say I won't, you're taking power over that and saying I choose not to. That's a very big difference. A very small change in a word, but very big difference. And one of the first steps for us to do in that conscious creation of our reality is to really listen to ourselves and our speech and how we speak and how we think. Because when I say I can't do this, it most of the time means I won't do it. And usually I won't do it because I believe that if I do blank, right? So let me think of some. There's so many examples in so many different directions. I had a woman who came into me once who had cancer multiple times in her lungs and had it removed. And in the operation of having it removed, they paralyzed her vocal cords. So she had almost no voice. Like literally the first session I had with her, we were sitting on opposite ends of a futon, and I had to lean forward to hear her because her voice was a whisper, right? And so we and she said to me, she said, they told me I'll never have my voice again, and I don't believe them. And I had seen her daughter about different things, and her daughter had referred her to me. And so we started working, and it was like 6 months after we started working together, she could start to be heard much more. And so what did it come down to? What we work on in energy healing, when we really look at shifting things that are at the core level so that we do completely have the power over changing our reality, we realize that the stuff that we hold inside of us is what causes the physical things that come up in our reality, whether it's physical in our injuries or sicknesses, or in our relationships, or in our interactions, or emotionally, all kinds of stuff. Anyway, 6 months after we started working together, her voice started coming back. And we did a lot of work on what? On her having no voice, because she had been in a abusive marriage for, I can't remember, it was like 26 or 29 years, and had divorced and all kind of stuff. And she had no voice, literally. Like everybody just stepped all over her. Like and where does that come from? That comes from like low self-worth, or belief that you have to be subordinate, or all kinds of different beliefs. So for 6 months, we worked on all that, and we worked on shifting all that together. And I started to teach her how to do that within herself. And so in 6 months, there was this amazing change, and she could start to be heard more. And then she took the Trinity class, and within another 6 months, like she could talk to a group of people, and she's heard normally, like I'm speaking today, like. And so it's funny, and it was just so night and day. Then I didn't talk to her. Like, she was around for a while, and then she, went off and did her own thing. And then she called me, I don't know, like a year ago. And when I answered the phone, it was funny because I have her number on my phone, and I answered, and I didn't even recognize her voice because it was so strong. It was so powerful. And I was like, oh my God, that is a perfect example. And I remember her saying to me that she had definitely had never intended on going back to the doctor, who told her she'd never have her voice again. But after we worked together, she planned on going just so she could talk to him and he could hear her, right? Because she's like, you know what? Screw you, because I don't need to believe you. I know my body, and I know I can change it. I know my reality, and I know I can change it. And many times we have that voice and we quell it because we don't believe we're good enough. We don't believe we're strong enough. We don't believe we're worthy enough. We don't believe we have the ability, or we don't believe we're magical enough. Like, there's all kinds of things that we hold, right? So when we talk about, and that's just one of many experiences, right? I've worked with people on letting go of their allergies. I've letting go, like there are many people that I've worked with who've been on medications of different kinds for years and years and years. And after we worked together for a while now, on their own choice, they stopped taking the medications, and then they were fine. So part of that is the remembrance of us as creators of reality, and everything that happens in our reality, everything, including and especially what happens in our body, is a physical representation of stuff that we hold energetically as part of this experience in duality and separation. So, I mean, that's a big, and like a lot of times people say, well, it's a big chunk to bite off, right? But the funny thing is, the biggest step is taking that self-responsibility, because when we take the self-responsibility, we realize we create our reality, and then there's nothing outside of our scope of power that we can't change. Because when I create my reality, it's my reality. So then it's like drawing something on a piece of paper. If I don't like it, I can erase it, and I can redraw it. And so we forget that sometimes. Well, we forget that a lot. And we'll sit there and we'll spend all this energy on getting angry, or we'll frustrated, or sick. So here's some interesting things, right? So things like this. We have a really deeply embedded habit of just accepting sickness and injury as a permanent thing in our lives. I find it really fascinating and interesting that at my age, just turned 51, that I have so many friends that are on this constant stream of prescription drugs, and that like their whole like motivations on like how much money they make and everything else, so that they could either be covered by insurance, or that they could pay for, their prescriptions. And I'm like, okay, well, that's the first step to alleviate the discomfort. But the next step is the thing is we usually stop there, and then we put all our energy to maintaining that Band-Aid. So then, but the key in consciousness and our evolution is to take this next step. And the next step is to say, okay, what's the core underlying issue, the core underlying energy that's causing me to manifest this in my life? Now, a lot of times we'll say, oh, it's genetic, it's environmental. And so, yes, there are physical representations of things that happen and cause interaction. And so we can look at that as sort of like clues as to, why I allowed that to be created in my reality, right? So listen to the words, right? Because as soon as I say I allowed that to be created in my reality, I take on that responsibility. And then we say, okay, so even if it's it's a genetic disease, right? What we consider a genetic disease. Okay, well then what would be important for me is then to go and focus on shifting to dissolve and complete the familial agreements that causes me to have to learn lessons through this sickness or illness. Then you can let it go. Or you can complete it. There's so many different choices. And so I've worked with people who have terminal illnesses, and yes, some of them have died. But what I tell people when they come in is it's the key to success in our consciousness and to stepping into our power, into realizing our ability to create and change our reality is that we resolve the beliefs that we're victims to anything. And, the ego wants to balk at that because the ego finds it very comfortable to externalize and push blame out on other people, other things, other situations, things that I can't see. There's can't, things I can't control. Control is also an ego word, by the way. And so the thing is, when we step back and we start looking at things and we say, okay, so good morning, Gloria. So when we step back and say, okay, so why am I hitting this roadblock? So then we get to these further steps along the lines, like, because at some point you say, I agree with my higher self that I don't have to have my body as a message board anymore. So then I can stop having, physical issues come up unless I'm really being ignorant and purposely ignorant, purposely ignoring the messages that are coming to me. But if I commit to getting the messages from my higher self, getting the message from the universe, however you want to look at it, to redirect myself, if I refuse to do that, to a really, alarming level, then of course, then I'll allow it. So here's the thing. If I get something in my physical body, then what happens is I'm like, oh, okay, there's something that's been smacking me in the head that I've just been ignoring because otherwise I wouldn't have it in my body at all anymore. And that's the funny thing. I just don't get sick. So like when we take away all these other factors of saying, of course, my spouse got a cold, like this even goes down to a cold, right? Oh, my spouse got a cold. Everybody around me has a cold. I have had people around me. I've been in the middle of like hospitals and sick rooms. I've been in the middle of I've had clients come to me who are very sick and I've just not gotten sick. So, and part of that is, so what was the virus? The virus is something that invades us, sort of takes over our cells. And then, it's our immune system that kicks in to kill the virus. Okay, so here's the thing. If we believe that we are 100% in our power, then I don't have to allow something to take me over. If I, and so here's the thing. So that's one, like we also have these beliefs in there. So this is where all the beliefs start coming in. If we start talking about beliefs, it's about, sometimes it's about that. It's about allowing myself to be taken over, right? And be a victim to something. Many times it's this belief that I have to be a part of the human race, I have to act like others, or I have to have the similar experience as others. Or what's the real common one? Misery loves company. How many times have you heard people say that, right? So we have those beliefs like that culturally make us more acceptable, right? So when people around us that we love get sick, then we at some point allow ourselves to get sick, which sounds sort of funny and ridiculous when you say it out loud, but it's true. And these are beliefs that we have. To be accepted, I have to get sick too. To be accepted, like if you listen to some people, like that's all they talk about is what are my ailments? What are the things that are wrong in my life? What are the things that are wrong with me? Oh, my back hurts. And it's not that we can't have things that don't feel good all the time, right? Because those are also, again, those are messages to ourselves. Instead of spending all this energy and in recreating the pain in your back or whatever, the key is to shift yourself to a place of, okay, so what burden am I holding on to? It's causing me to manifest back pain. Shoulders too. There's different kinds of burdens that we hold on to. So it's like, okay, and once we start hitting on those things, like we can look at that. So do we have to look at them? No. But in the beginning, it's very important to start to be observant to all this because it helps to retrain the mind connected to the ego, right? To align with and harmonize with that realization that we do create our realities and that we can change them. So once we start playing with it and then the mind says, oh, we did change that. Oh, look at how much better that is. Then it sort of gets out of the way and allows us, like it stops fighting us and allowing ourselves to do this conscious creation stuff. So the biggest part is listening to what we can. And like people say, oh, I have a handicap and whatever. It's like, okay. And so we choose these things at some level. Yeah, I had somebody come into me once whose sister so this is a woman in her 50s somewhere, whatever, and her sister I guess is a quadriplegic or whatever that was, and because she got hit by a car, by a drunk driver when she was like 12 years old. And so she spends a lot of her time taking care of her mother and her sister. And in having our discussions, at one point she said, so what you're telling me is my sister chose to be hit by that car, by that drunk person. And I said, at some level, yeah, that was part of a choice. And she like was really upset about that because she had been so angry for so many years at the driver, right? Held all this anger. And I said, okay, so if we take away the judgment of the situation and we say, okay, so what was the catalyst that your sister caused, or what is the message that your sister agreed to hold in your family to remind everybody of? And that day she couldn't really accept that because it was a challenging thing to look at, right? So a couple of sessions later, we were talking, and she was talking about how, like, I guess she had a brother, and he's sort of like, I don't know, had some issues, and I don't know if it was drugs or something, and kept on taking money or borrowing money from the mother and all this kind of stuff, this family stuff. And so she was like talking about that, and she goes, I get so angry. She goes, and my sister, she's still like that 12-year-old, and she loves everyone. She loves everyone unconditionally. She goes, doesn't matter what they do, she still loves them. And it was so funny because I heard that coming out of her mouth, and then I stopped and I said, so maybe that's the message she agreed to show everybody, is that everybody's worthy of being unconditionally loved no matter what they do and who they are in life. And then she just sort of looked at me. And then she was like, I never really thought of it that way, but I can see what you're saying. Sometimes we have things happen in our lives that our soulmates have agreed to happen because they haven't listened for them to learn. But yeah, sometimes it's to learn unconditional love. Sometimes it's to learn forgiveness and acceptance, and all this kind of stuff. So when we step back and look at those words, the can't, the mustn't, and mustn't, a lot of times you can't because it's it's wrong, it's illegal, like all that kind of stuff. The key is to, and should. Oh, should is another one. Should is another ego word. Oh, you should do this, or you shouldn't do that. Should not do that, and all kind of stuff. Because it implies, well, because it makes you a better person, it makes you a worse person. It is the right thing to do. It's the wrong thing to do. You should because I would do that. you shouldn't because I wouldn't do that. Things like that. Or I should do this. That's usually because, so say like, okay, there's something that you keep on meaning to get to, right? So let's sort of like unravel that. All right, I should get to this. I'm going to do this instead. The real thing you're saying is, well, I'm choosing not to do that. I'm going to make this a priority instead right now. And so regardless of what that is, because people talk about, oh, I should go to the gym. I should work out. Well, that's also another like rabbit hole to go down to, is like, why? Well, to be healthy because I need to lose weight, or, I'm not happy with my body. And a lot of times that's also externally programmed things. And, but then it's like, okay, and I don't feel like that my body is good as it is. I don't feel like I'm good as I am. I don't feel like I'm divine and perfect as I am, which is a lack thing, which means that we're not starting out in that perfect place. So like, how many times we say, oh, nobody's perfect. I have erased that from my vocabulary. I say everybody's perfect, because we are all part of divine consciousness, and we chose to embody ourselves. We choose to embody ourselves. We choose the individuality of the soul, so that we have a set of lessons or things we wanted to learn in this whole experience of separation, right? So I just totally lost my train of thought. Give me a second, it'll come back. Oh my goodness, I totally lost that. Anyway. Oh, that's the perfection. So thank you. So we choose to come in like this, and we choose, and the thing is, I am embodied perfectly for the set of lessons I'm choosing to have in this life, for the set of things I'm choosing to do in this life. I'm embodying myself perfectly, whether I'm a man or a woman, or transgender, or neither, or whether I am, tall or short, heavy or thin, sometimes even healthy or sickly, all kinds of things like that. These are the choices that we made to come into this life, to have the experiences that we have, right? And to resolve things that we have outstanding from other lifetimes and other perspectives. It all depends on how you want to look at it. So we are then embodied perfectly. So instead of saying nobody's perfect, I say everyone's perfect. You're perfect as you are right now, for the lessons that you're choosing to have. Now, when you're ready to be done with the lessons and resolve them, complete them, then you can move on and change the body, change the experience. But that's, again, taking responsibility and power over your own reality. And we get lost in that so often. And it's funny, because we can talk about this stuff on a bigger scale, but then when we have like the day-to-day conversations, we'll be like, oh, I can't. Or the other word is I need. Because that starts out with the belief of lack, that I need something that's outside of me that I don't already have. Again, that starts with that imperfection thing. Oh God, belief systems all throughout the world have this whole belief of starting from lack in many cases. We are divine and perfect and amazing and infinite as we are here. As crazy as we might make somebody, as crazy as somebody else might make us, but that's all us. That's all the triggers and all the things that are within us. So here's another thing. When we judge somebody else, we're judging something that's within ourselves, or there's something coming up within ourselves. So it's a big step to embrace the reality of full self-responsibility and the creation of what's in our realities. So we have individual realities, we have collective realities. We choose all that. We can talk about, what we hate politically until we turn blue in the face, but we've chosen it. Even the things that we abhor from our opinions and perspective of what's good and bad, we've chosen for some collective message. And here's the thing. If we ignore our individual messages, they start to get bigger, because we're all part of that same consciousness. So it's sort of like, I can prick my finger, I can break my finger, I can break my hand, get degenerative arthritis, I could do this, blah, blah, blah. And then if I'm still ignoring it, then, it can start to manifest in different ways that are even bigger around me, and then include my family, my community, because we're all ignoring the same message, because we are all part of that same consciousness, but we just have different manifestations. of the same understandings at the of the same lessons too at the collective level, but just in very individual ways. So it breaks down into all these different patterns, all these different ways and perspectives to look at it. So the key is for this week, I want you to listen to your words. I mean, there's so much more to this, but this week I want you to look at your words, and I want you and listen to your words, listen and observe yourself, and listen to when you say I can't, and step back for a moment and say I won't, and then even step back and say I choose not to. Because then what will happen is then we judge ourselves. Oh, what do you mean I choose not to? I choose not to work out. I choose not to meditate. I choose not to do things for myself. Yeah, that's actually true. Because we have a whole set of motivations as to why we want to do other things first. Because, oh, I want somebody else to love me. I want this other person to think I'm a good person. You know, a lot of times we do that for our spouse, for our children. Oh, well, I'm going to put everything on hold when my husband or wife wants me to do this because I want him or her to love me. Because I don't believe that I'm lovable. I'm already love worthy without that love kind of thing. We have that whole thing embedded. So many different layers of that. But listen to where you're saying I can, I must, and I have to. Because the next question asks us, well, what if I didn't? Or what if I did? What would that look like? If I did that from a place where I am in a space of unconditional self-love and know and trust that I am divinely perfect and innately worthy and legitimate, this is a topic that's come up this week. If I know that, and that means I can do anything, I can create anything, then what would that look like? And open your heart to that possibility. That's where we start. So thank you so much for joining me this week. Have a great one. This is Angela Coulter signing out on this week's Living the Shift. See you next time.